Hello, hello. Welcome back to Boss Lady Conversations. I'm your girl, Coach Khaya. I'm a boss wife, mompreneur, sister, writer, and certified transformational coach. I help dreamers access their power by healing the trauma of their past, reigniting their dreams, and manifesting the miracles that truly matter today. My IG handle is at I am Coach Khaya.
Yes, Coach Khaya. Welcome back, Boss Lady listeners. I'm Monica L., a boss lady, Cleveland born, LA raised, on a journey of freedom and happiness as an educator, entrepreneur, and self-published author. I believe all things are possible through synergy. Let's get it. My IG handle is at Monica L_writer. And I just want to take the time just to shout out everybody. We are so excited. This is season 2. We're on all the platforms, including YouTube. Thank you for all of our followers and supporters. You are amazing to us.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the comments. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We know you loved all the reviews of the Best Man final chapters. I mean, we are just so overjoyed by the support and love that we have received this season. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So true, Monica L. I mean, we hope that you've not only been enjoying hanging out with us, learning with us, growing with us, because we've just had so many phenomenal boss ladies join the conversation. And we want you to continue bossing up in your life because the only thing constant is change, and we want to continue to evolve with you. So continue to give us your feedback, tell us what you think, and feel free to email us if you know a boss lady that wants to join the conversation, the Boss Lady family. bossladyconversations@gmail.com. And feel free to follow us at boss_lady_conversation. Today's show is so important because knowing our history can't be confined to one month. And we want to make sure that you know that learning Black history is really a lifelong process. And the guest that we have today, she is a Boss Lady alumna, meaning she has been with us before. She is absolute family. And she is going to help us to really understand the meaning of Black history on a deeper level and why it matters that we show up, show out, and continue to learn. Forget about just the month. It is a lifelong process. And we hope that you walk away from today's show knowing that and having some resources on how to live that.
Yes, Coach Khaya, Black History 365. Yes,
Yes.
every single day. It's so much that I still learn every day. It's so much I don't know. I mean, so it's an ongoing process. It's a life learning, you know?
Yes.
And it's so important because we are making history and there's those who come before us. We stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. And I am so excited and have the pleasure of bossing up in today's conversation with alumna Tammy Gordon. We're so happy to have Boss Lady Tammy back for a full episode of Boss Lady Conversations with me and Coach Khaya. Tammy is a history lover, narrative shifter, mom, boy mom, to be clear, wife, and who values the space of authentic connections and empowerment. She believes that what we create is generational shifts, and what she is doing her part is to leave a legacy for those to follow. And some of her projects include the Greenwood Seneca Project. Her goal is to reconnect Black people to joy and honor in their history. We welcome Boss Lady Tammy back to our show. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, ladies. I'm so excited to be back. Thank you for having me again. And now I get both of you, Coach Khaya and Monica. I'm so excited.
Yes.
Thank you. So happy to share space with you.
Oh, no, we are a pleasure to have you with us. So we're just going to start off today's show with, as a historian, if you can have a conversation with a social activist, past or present, who would it be and what question would you ask?
Ooh. Ooh, okay. You know what? There's so many. My love of history came from reading. And so most activists that come to mind naturally are ones who are authors, and those who have put their call to actions, they've put life and humanity behind our ancestors in ways that we can consume through narrative. I just watched Toni Morrison's The Pieces I Am on Netflix, which was just, it was phenomenal. And I had to repurchase books I didn't have, and I was like, I got to get through some of these because I can't. Some of them are tough, but really understanding a bit more about why she writes or wrote the way that she wrote, like her intention around including and elevating Black narrative for Black people. There was So maybe I'll say, to answer the question, maybe it's Toni Morrison. Beverly Jenkins is always the one that initially comes to mind. She's author and also an author, but she writes historical romance, and they're sensual. They're fresh.
Right.
But the pieces that I love about both what Toni Morrison and an author like Beverly Jenkins offer in their activism is, when you write historical fiction, you're telling the truth, right? You're using real time and places, you're using real scenarios and building off stories of real people. And so you get that factual aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're so disconnected from like the truth and fullness of our stories,
Right.
you get the benefit of their art and creativity to help you round out what you may have known about those people or about that time period or about those places. And so both of them, Beverly Jenkins is still around, and so I'd love to be able to have a conversation with her. And Toni, I just feel her like in and through everything that I do. And so in terms of past and recent past, I'd love to just connect with her and understand how she made the choice and where her conviction lied in choosing writing as her art form, and then allowing that to be like this tool of advocacy for her in and through Black culture, and how she used that as a tool to like disrupt but also really empower folks.
Yeah.
There's a ton, but like off the top, that's where I'm leaving.
I love it. I love it.
True. Yes, and I can't agree more. That documentary had me like, man,
Right.
like what? Like how? I had
Like
so many
how?
questions.
So many questions. And she brought, we could probably do a whole episode on Toni Morrison and that Netflix documentary, but she brought, one of the things that stuck with me about that was she brought up Frederick Douglass and how many pieces of work and like activism and the type of activism that he had, and how potentially unrelatable Frederick Douglass was to Black folks. He's Frederick Douglass, right? So like trailblazer, advocated and created a lot of momentum and movement for like what freedom and liberties we have today. But she's just like, who was he talking to? Right? Like his audience were white abolitionists. And so folks that were working on the other side, not just not the political aisle, but like the other side in general, trying to make room and really work in allyship for Black liberation. But she's like, he wasn't talking to me, because if he was talking to me, he didn't have to say it like that, or he didn't have to offer context. And so even as we think and like enter this dialogue around Black history and who we're talking to and what it's for, and who's the audience, and like who we trying to get on the bandwagon? Is Black History Month for us, or is like for everybody else to recognize that we built this? So she brought in so many threads through that documentary that, again, we could probably spend a whole hour just talking about her, but I won't do that now. But that was one of the pieces that really stuck out to me, was just her call in for perspective around folks that we're used to hearing, and are the voices in Black history. And like what my 7-year-old son is probably getting at school is the Frederick Douglass and the Malcolm X and the Martin Luther Kings and Rosa Parks. And how all those are really important voices, but they were very specific voices, right? And we have to bring in voices like hers and Angela Davis and like other folks alongside of that to really like get the full picture of the richness of our history.
Yes.
Okay. That's beautiful.
Boss Lady Conversations.
So we're just in awe of the work that you're doing and the way that you are really leaning into Black history and even understanding landmarks and how Black people should really pay attention, right, to what's going on. So I would love to know if you could tell our listeners, like, what sparked your passion for leaning into Black history this way. If you could tell us a little bit about the Greenwood Seneca Project too, and why it matters to everyone.
Sure. So I will say the most recent journey in the birth of Greenwood Seneca is only about 3 years old, when I had to piece my experience in hindsight, like across my career. And I ask myself this question a lot because as boss ladies, as professionals, like we're in this constant state of sort of rebranding and reimagining and representing ourselves to an audience that will approve, disapprove, write a check, partner with you, do all of these things. And so I'm really cognizant of what that means as the professional side of me is just like, all right, is this what you've been doing your whole life? Or is this like brand new? Or you coming in, on the heels like everybody else of the Black Lives Matter movement and, the racial disruption in 2020? Or is this a real part of who you are and what you've been doing? And so I think those threads are important to name and sort of call myself out. And as we have the dialogue and the candid conversation around what happened and how this happened, my professional background has been in access work. And so I've always seen my role as being this connector between those who aspire to get to a place, those who are in that place, and bridging the gap between. And I've always done that with folks who look like me. My son is named after Camden, New Jersey. I taught at Newark Middle School. I did a teaching fellowship outside of Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the areas that are predominantly Black. And so I have found myself in these spaces and like just sort of wrapping myself around young folks, Black people who are at risk of being forgotten, right? That has been a thread throughout my professional career. And so when I sat with that, as I had this experience of being really called through and into the historical and ancestry work more deeply, it was during 2020. We had moved to a new neighborhood. We moved out of LA and into the suburbs, into the good part of town, the top school district for our 7-year-old. And we're the only Black folks out here. And my husband is a runner, and he would run around the neighborhood. And then Ahmaud was murdered, and then George was murdered, and Breonna Taylor in between that. And we were terrified. It was just like, you can't be out here living your life the way that we all are entitled to do. You don't have permission to do that right now, right? There's something else that we have to do. And so we're sitting with the emotion that I think a lot of us were sitting with during that time. And now Netflix and Prime are playing all the Black movies, right? So The Help is on, and I'm watching The Help for the sixth time. We've all seen these movies. And Viola Davis is in the kitchen with the woman who is interviewing her and getting ready to do the story on all the maids. And she's sitting there and she says something to her like, wow, I've never had a white person in my house before. This is the first time I've had a white person in my house. And behind her was a picture of brown hair, blue-eyed, white Jesus, right? And it was that moment that I was just like, oh my God, I am dually degreed. I am I'm a professional. I feel like I'm woke. I'm out here in this. I'm spiritual. I'm religious. I'm like all these things. I went to a Catholic undergrad school. And somehow I've been lied to. Somehow in all of this work, and we were just in Tennessee and, in the deep South, so you have to be even more mindful of how you bring in spirituality and religion and not excluding folks as we unpack what this conversation is, because our spirituality and religion, at its origin, were in conflict, right? And as we exist today, they flow a bit more, and they're both really important, how we shape our existence as humans navigating this world and the spiritual realm. So I'm not holding those two things separate, but I do have to separate them for the sake of conversation. That part of the control mechanism was we had to be convinced that our only access to God and spirit was through a singular point. And I believe in God. I believe in a higher power. I believe in spirit. And I grew up believing in Jesus. So this, if that is your access point, great. It was just the moment for me to answer the question directly that I realized that I had more access to my ancestors and had more access to God and spirit than what I had been taught. And so for me personally, it was this like, I felt like I had been cracked open. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I could be out here in the backyard talking to great grandma and some ancestors whose name I don't know and still be in connection and in communion with God. Like I didn't know that.
Right.
And what would it mean for me personally if I accessed that tool a bit more and I got coaches and I got spiritual guides and I sat face to face with my religious practices to say like I'm fully equipped as a being to access them and our history differently. So long version of that's how I sort of got into I need to connect with them a bit more deeply. That led my spiritual path sort of led me down this historical path. I said, okay, well, we don't know them. I didn't learn this history. I didn't go. One of my biggest regrets, I'm gonna tell you all right now, one of my biggest regrets is not going to HBCU. My husband's a Morehouse grad. My entire family is Spellhouse. And so I don't know how I missed that boat, but I did. Not going to HBCU, not going to Baychella is my number two biggest regret. And I'm just like, I didn't have access to any of this. No one taught me these things. And even when we were having conversation with some students who were at Fisk University in Tennessee, they're just like, yeah, our history's kind of brushed over, like some folks were captured and put on the Middle Passage. I think some of them jumped, some of them stayed. They were slaves for a few hundred years and then they were free and now we're equal and like Black people are fighting for something that doesn't exist anymore. And like for them, that's as much as they've been taught. And so it's not necessarily an apathy. It's like no one's told me otherwise.
Right.
And so I've made it a point now to bridge my work in access and nonprofit and fundraising and all of these things to say, okay, how can I be a bridge to our people, our history that are at risk of extinction? Like if we pretend that slavery didn't happen, if we pretend that this place that we live was not built on an institution designed to separate us and make one group feel less than over the other, if we pretend all of that didn't happen, then we lose access to all the people that made our lives and our beings possible. And so there's a deep sense of homage that I want to pay to them, just as like Tammy the human. Then there's Tammy the mom, the wife, and now like I want to do some good while I'm here.
Right.
Greenwood Seneca is birthed out of all of those things, like that spiritual journey mixed with how can I use my skills and expertise and capabilities to do something good, and this like really deep innate desire to want to connect to ancestors in ways that I didn't have access to. Like I can go back maybe to great, maybe a third great grandma or grandfather. I can't go back farther than that. And once you get that far, right, like my parents are in their 60s, which means their parents I have a great aunt who's 93. Her parents, that's it. That's like 2 generations away from being impacted by like really living in the post or the aftermath of slavery, and let alone her parents being sharecroppers or living in an environment or living in an institution of enslavement. And so we're not that far removed.
We're not.
And it was really taboo. Like my 93-year-old aunt, I was just like, oh, Mary, did y'all ever talk about this? Like, did y'all ever talk about slavery, or have you ever been on a plantation? Or she says, oh, baby, we didn't talk about that kind of stuff. Like we didn't know. We moved my family's from Connecticut. We moved to this part of town where we're with the others. We're like, we don't talk about that. And so for me, I'm just like, all right, well then how do I ever know if I don't talk about it?
Right.
And then in talking about it, what does that bring up? Right. So the real premise, or I guess the crux of the Greenwood Seneca Foundation, right? So we've got my husband and I started Greenwood Seneca, the for-profit, in 2020. And so there's a business arm that does some things, and I'm happy to talk about those things. But my husband really leads that side of the house. The nonprofit side, the foundation side, is what I spearhead, and the crux in it is not just about revisiting our history for the sake of revisiting. It is revisiting to find and reclaim honor and joy in the experience of it. Because what I've also found is, like, we bring up Black history and we immediately go to chains. Like, we immediately go to the terror and the horror, and the institution of slavery is all of those things, right? So we're not going to pretend that those two things don't exist, right?
Right.
But I feel like as Black folks, we carry the institution of slavery and our enslavement as an identity, as like somehow that's ours. Like, we weren't slaves, we were enslaved, and we survived enslavement. And so let's give slavery back to enslavers. Like, y'all did that. We didn't do that.
Right.
And we're not talking people today, right? Because, like, our people today aren't enslaved. White people today are not slave owners, right? And we're talking about today. We're talking about our ancestors. And so there's some reconciliation that folks on the other side, like, your people enslaved other people, so y'all gonna have to reconcile with that. Like, that's not our burden to carry too. We can't carry surviving enslavement in addition to carrying you feeling bad that your ancestors enslaved us. So you give that back. We survived enslavement. In order to survive an institution like slavery in America and all the things that we know it to be, what still exists today in forms of prisons, in the form of police brutality, in forms of workplace disenfranchisement, like, all of it exists in less obvious or overt ways today. For a group of people, and now we get to claim that these are our people, for a group of people to survive that kind of institution over 400 years, there had to have been a choice of joy, and there had to have been a choice of love and play, and a choice of life. Because anytime I think back to, like, could I have survived that? Would I have chosen that? Like, it would have been easier not to. It would have been easier to be like, we're good. We actually know how to make all of the poisons. Like, we know how to manipulate and use the land to both our benefit and not.
Right.
We didn't have to live in this, but our people chose that, and we chose life, and we chose love, and we chose marriage under the craziest of circumstances, and we chose babies and families and risking it all to reconnect our families when we didn't have to. And so it's really that aspect that Greenwood Seneca Foundation is working to help us reconnect to, because my belief, or the theory of change, is that if we can retouch or access the power that existed within our ancestors to choose life and freedom and possibility and dream when there was no reason to, when they had no frame of reference for it. There were no Beyoncés, right? Like, we didn't have a frame of, like, somebody made it. We didn't have a Barack. It was just an idea. It was just a hope. And if we could connect to that, would we then reclaim some possibility and imagination and joy in our lives today? And would we potentially change what we are handing down generationally? Would the conversations at the dinner table be a bit different? Would our relationships to one another, would the idea of 3 Black women being in a space together feel like sistership rather than there's only room for one?
Right.
Like, would we reclaim some things that have been taken from us,
Right.
both in the physical and proverbial way? And so that's what Greenwood Seneca is holding possible through this revisiting of historic spaces where enslavement happened.
Wow. Now that's beautiful, Tammy. I mean, you you definitely summed it up. And we know that this is a passion project and hard work. And I agree with you. A lot of us can't go back 3 or 4 generations, which, other individuals can. They can go all the way back to a whole nother country, and say this is this and this is that, where ours is kind of a mystery. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that. And you're right, they don't talk about it. It's a lot of things that is just not said. So we don't know. Now, whether it's trauma, PTSD, we can go on down the list why the stories are not told. And when you watch something like Hidden Figures, I can say from my standpoint that that's still today, times when we watching stuff, I'm like, wait, is that 19 or is that 2020?
Or is that now? Right.
Yeah, where's it at? Because I can see similarities. So, I do understand why the stories are not told, but I also understand the importance of the stories being told. So we definitely commend you and your husband for taking on this project and providing that historical context. And for this generation and for generations to come, because I feel like the more, quote unquote, we progress, and like you say, we have the presidents and we have things, people think that, oh, things are good. And it's like, no, let's talk about the day to day. And, the fact that, obviously I am a Black woman and, I understand the trauma that happens daily in our community, but I never thought about your husband had to change his routine.
Right.
Of what was going on and the impact that has, and that you have a son, so with that, and for our Boss Lady listeners, how do you balance all of those things? You clearly have a clear path that you're going down, but at the end of the day, like you say, you're a mom and a wife. So how do you balance all these hats that you wear?
A lot of prayer. There's some tears. It's hard, and I think some of my maybe hesitation right now is that I just want to be honest that it's not easy. And I come from a really close family. There's a lot of privilege in my existence. And so I also have to honor and name that my dad is one of 9. My mom's one of 4. My parents, my cousins moved from the East Coast to be on the West Coast. Like I've got a really beautiful network of folks. My sister married into a gorgeous family, like internally gorgeous family who has taken us in as family. And so I have a real village of folks who can help me navigate and figure things out. And I can lean on women who have been married and like want to stay married to help me navigate what it means to be a wife. My sister has 2 children, and I've just got the opportunity to connect in mothership with a lot of people that I love and respect and admire. And so I honor that there is privilege in having access to that. And so I use them and I lean on them and I call them in and to help me. I think the other piece is I've had to, and this has been a process, right? Like I was with my sister and my mother this past weekend, and my sister's like, "Girl, you've been doing some work on yourself over the last few years, right? Like it doesn't come without some real help." I think I've had over a dozen coaches over the last 5 years across, how do I navigate professional stuff? How do I show up as a Black woman in a white space? How do I make sure I'm heard? Through ears that are not hearing me other than you're yelling at me, you're angry about something. I'm like, I'm not angry, honey. I mean it. And I don't know how else that this is not like this is on purpose. I mean what I'm saying to you, and that's not angry. It's just intentional. I've had coaches who've helped me with that, and also coaches who are just like, hey, Tim, you got some stuff that you need to work through, doing some shadow work, which, I think is really important, especially for our community, but marginalized communities in general. There's trauma in there that's just imprinted on us, whether we've directly experienced it or like just by way of a police car driving by. Like I can feel the sensations in my body that happen that are imprinted on me, not from my own personal experience, but from the experience that I know my people have with police, as an example. So I lean on experts and resources and coaches to navigate. And I've been giving myself permission to just be all of those things and test out what being me means. Right. So my son is one of 20 Black students in a 600-person school. So mommy's going to show up as the Black mom who's like, why are we not talking about Black History Month? Why is my baby the only one? Like I have to be okay raising those conversations and not feeling bad or not feeling like it's going to single him out or not feeling like, ooh, are you the angry mom again? I have to be his advocate, and I got to lean into that. And I have to hold the space as like, there's only but so much I'm going to be able to do in this lifetime. And part of my belief, at least supports and affirms that I chose to come back as Tammy. My spirit is here in this body, and it is going to do something to lift up and lighten up something that I can pass off a bit easier to the next generation. So that's not for me to solve all the things. And when I allowed myself to remove the idea of like, yo, it's me, like I gotta do this, or if my life's work is not impactful, then I'm not doing enough. It's am I doing enough to make it a little bit lighter? Am I doing something that is really aligned to my spirit and my core? And if it's not, let that go and bring in and realign to things that feel really good. And that's not always easy to do, especially when we got the only species on the planet that has to pay to be here, right? So the fact that we got mortgages and car notes and we got to pay for groceries, like those are all real things. And I got to make decisions that help me resource my life in a way that allow me to still exist, in a way that is safe and abundant with the things that we really need, but also be okay and trust that if I say no, it's because it wasn't for me to begin with. And so that mental balance has helped me with like the actual physical balance of, oh, homie's sick, I have to go pick him up, no problem. I'm going to push that meeting off and go pick up little man. And so there's a real, it's a real circus act around here. But everything I feel like I'm able to do right now is done with like real conviction and love and meaning. And I feel really grateful to have the space to be able to make those kinds of decisions.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you. Yes.
In reading your article, I felt like you did such a good job of naming why people don't engage in Black history. I thought it was I was like, oh. Okay, yeah, she understands. She understands. I mean, it was just so comprehensive. You mentioned the fear, the pain, the trauma. And then I love the way that you explain, why you choose to engage and all of the benefits that it can provide. And so, I'm really so grateful for everything that you are sharing with us and everything that you represent, just in being who you are. And you made me think a lot about, motherhood. And somehow I find that when I was showing up at the school, I would always like grab my head wrap. I'm like, I'm gonna be unapologetic every day. And I was like, wait, but okay, hold on. You don't have to grab the head wrap every time, but it's like I just felt so strongly about making a statement. And so I just appreciate you even sharing that as moms. We have decisions to make as parents, we have decisions to make about that as well. And we have to advocate for our children. Period.
Right.
Period.
You understand. So thank you so much for understanding that. So I did want to know, how I know it's so much to teach and it's so overwhelming, but how have you started to really teach your son how to understand his history and how to kind of develop a love for who he is?
He's 7, and it's come in waves, I think. I won't say that in hindsight, we could probably go back and write some curriculum or scaffold this out, right? But like, we know there's no way to parent and do this, especially as a Black parent. I will say initially it started with his hair, and it was, baby, you got curly hair, rock that. This is your crown, and like own that. And this is the versatility and the options that you have as a Black person, but also as a Black boy. Like, do what you do. You can cut it off if you want. Also, like, you can get it braided, you can wear it curly, and here's how you take care of it. And so we spent a lot of time initially explaining to him to like cherish that his hair was able to do the kinds of things that it did. And I think that has made him really proud to be able to say like, oh, my hair does different things, and let me protect that. And we use that as a mechanism to help him understand that he has to protect his body. And mommy and daddy's job is to protect you. And so for as long as we're around, we got you, right? Like no one is going to come into your space or hurt your body. But when we are not around, that is your job. And so head to toe, you work to protect your body. And so if somebody is doing something that will harm or get into your space or getting closer to your body than you appreciate, it is your responsibility to protect that, because you're going to be out here in this world at some point and they're not going to see your body as being valuable. So you protect your body. And that language is actually, it came from Between the World and Me, that book. And I always screw up this man's name. So don't, post this part and then apologize. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Wrote Between the World and Me and then The Water Dancer, but he uses that language around teaching his son to protect his body. And so in reading that book, it was helpful in learning the language. I would also say the way that we honor and connect and recognize that we are not in the world by ourselves is another piece that we share with him. There's an altar in our house. There's an altar in my office. And it's got as many pictures that, that need to be on there in terms of like folks who have passed that we had direct connection to. We make sure that he understands the importance of acknowledging family, and he loves his family. And I hope that we did a good job in sharing that with him. His family's huge, and he loves them. And ones who have passed, it's just like you still have access to them, like you can say hi to great grandma anytime you want to. You can say hi to great auntie whenever you want to, like they're with you. And so making the idea of like transition not super scary. And that started with Michael Jackson, to be honest. Like my dad made a comment of he was watching Thriller, and my dad was like, Michael Jackson's dead, right? And my son was like, what does that mean? What are you saying? But it allowed us to bring in this conversation of like, well, do you still feel Michael? Like when you listen to his music, like, do you still experience him? Like his energy, the vibration is still there. And so the same way that you access Michael Jackson, someone who you don't know, you can access anybody who has passed. So we use that as a way to help him understand that is something really sacred about his Blackness, but also just like you've got this really unique tool and gateway to connect. And then we're not scared to talk about it. We talk about being Black. He asks all the questions a 7-year-old would ask, like, Mommy, why do you always ask me if there's a Black person TV show I'm watching? Like, why does everybody have to look like me, Mom? And I said, bro, they don't all have to look like you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, are you consuming things that also have you in mind, baby? That's what I'm asking you. So whether he's annoyed with me, he's aware about it. He's aware of just like, oh,
right.
Nobody looks like me. And I kind of spend my entire day with people that don't look like me. And maybe I should, when I make my avatar, on my Xbox game, I'll make somebody that's got locks. So like, I'll make somebody that's sort of more representative of what I know. And he's still a baby, so I'm also just like, you're allowed to be a kid and I want you to be a kid. But I also remember when he turned 5 and he started to lose some of that baby fat and like, was starting to like get a little, he's a boy. So he's getting a little bit of his chest. It's strange. And I remember crying with my husband because I was just like, this world is not going to see my baby as a baby anymore, and he's 5, but he's starting to look, he moves on his own. He can talk on his own. He's a little Black boy. And so I need him to be a bit more aware of his existence because of how the world currently treats and views his body. And so there's a few things, and I'm also learning, like, parents make this up. We are making it up as we go and hoping that you survive and we don't do anything to really harm you or damage you along the way.
Right.
So I am making it up, but also like using things that are really core values to who we are to help at least give him some frame of reference.
Right. I love that, Tammy. What I hear is just that you're embodying everything, mind, body, soul, spirit, and then you're making him think. because sometimes, you could just be in this world. And some environments really make you think like, oh, did I interact with anyone Black today? you know, or was I just moving, And then how does it feel to be in that space? And I think for most of us, we have been the only Black person in the room. And so when we go to other spaces, it's like, okay, I'm used to this, but not really thinking about what impact that really has. And are we speaking for the entire community being that person? Are we speaking for every person? But I love the way that you describe your son and your relationship. That really melts my heart. And I know that speaks to Coach Khaya. Y'all have so many similarities that we'll talk about offline, but we won't go there for the purpose of this conversation. But it's just beautiful because you're right. As a parent, you're just trying to pour into him as much as you can and what makes sense at his age, but also, understanding that he is a one of one, and how does that really impact, and like you say, protecting his body. Like, people should not come up to you and just touch your hair because it's different, or touch you, period. So I love what you said. And and then like as he grows and the different types of conversations, because he's in different spaces, and he will always be your baby, but society will see him as a young man and then a man. So that's all just so amazing. And thank you for sharing that, because I know that's very personal. Well, in Boss Lady Conversations, we're all about positivity and manifestation. So where do you see yourself at in like 5 years? Personally, professionally, wherever lane, or both?
No, I keep telling. I've been working with coaches who have made me write these things down, give it names, hold space. I am embarking on Greenwood Seneca Foundation alongside. I got, last time we spoke, I got 9 to 5 too, right? So I lead blavity.org, and I really believe in that work and the lens that entrepreneurship can hold for our community and for Black folks in particular. And then 6 to 9, 6 to midnight, 6 until I come back up for blavity, I'm doing Greenwood Seneca. And there's a couple of things. There was a thread in there, Monica, that you mentioned about like, we're so used to being the only, and we just sort of like numb our senses and expectations around what Toni Morrison names as the white gaze, right? And so everything that we do and experience is filtered through like how others are expecting it to feel, and how we see it through. And so in a year, in 5 years, I would love to have created space and potentially more permission for Black people to re-experience themselves, and re-experience spaces with a bit more autonomy and empowerment. Within Greenwood, that's really specific to like going back to land and historical sites and like grounds where I think there's a lot of ancestral energy and spirit and power that we have access to. But I would hope that we've at least created a container or an experience where we've given a lot more people permission to at least reconnect to that. I think secondly, I would love to be a space where it's like, I didn't know this, or I didn't think this, or I didn't consider this, and your platform, your voice, your thing, your product, whatever it is, helped me think a bit differently, helped me ask more questions. So like, very aligned to how I hope we're parenting our son is like, ask the question, be okay like reconsidering what you're told, and take up more space, right? Like if I could describe the feeling that I would hope my work in existence creates in 5 years, is right now how I experience going on to a sacred ground. What we've been talking is like sites of Blackness. So where Black happened, where it was created, because I mean, you guys know, but like all the boss ladies, Black histories, they stole us from all different places. And then we didn't know each other. We didn't know the language. We're from different tribes, different countries within this continent of Africa, brought us here, and then expected us to like separated us by making us one, right? Like their white made us black, and our blackness was created in this space of trauma and craziness. But like that's where black and black culture was also created, like in that trauma and in the existence of our kidnapping. And so spaces where that blackness was created, which happens to be places where enslavement also happened, are the spaces that I'm saying we can reconnect to a joy and a power that's there. And we don't go to those spaces. It feels weird. You go on and you're like, why am I here? Why would I ever go back here? Like I will drive by these gates. I may like that's for y'all. That's not for me anymore.
Right.
And I would love for us to like walk onto these spaces like it was our backyard. Like be able to walk in and through, not with this, oh my gosh, they're looking at me, or oh my gosh, why would I be here? But like, this is mine. Why are y'all here? Why do you feel okay having your bachelor party, wedding, whatever in this space? That's mine. And potentially in that shift of posture, like in that shift of reclamation of something potentially small, or like a backyard, a land, a quarters where we lived. We were enslaved on the entire plantation. So to call these enslaved quarters is where we lived. Our existence was enslavement, but if somehow I could bottle that up and say that we facilitated, or at least like created some ripple that allowed people to like sit up a bit taller and know that a lot more of this land, a lot more of this place that we're consistently abused by and mistreated by and left out of, if we knew for sure that it was ours, I'd be really proud that work, created or facilitated something like that. And so it's a combination of like, here's where I want to be, but I'm hoping that this is just the good that I'm pouring in and leaving behind. And so 5 years, 10 years, however long it takes me. Lauren London said, even though, the masses don't come to a thing, doesn't make it any less important or significant. And so I want to hold true that I can potentially do this, and that I've got enough time here on this planet to do it in a way that will create some ripples.
I love it. Thank you. Deep.
Yes, you have certainly created ripples today. And I know everyone who will watch this, they'll definitely feel, the energy of that. And hopefully it inspires action, because we don't want you to feel you have to do this work alone.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Monica, and just quickly, one of the things that you mentioned was around being the only or not wanting to go because like you're in this sea of folks that maybe don't look like you. Your Legacy Tours, which is the program within Greenwood Seneca Foundation that we launched in Tennessee, but are hoping to expand. And so folks who are in this space or connected to spaces, or maybe like don't even realize that you're connected to these spaces, we think there's an opportunity to create a unique experience for Black folks at these spaces. Go on the tours that are there during the day and like get all of the information. There's a lot of information that's important, and sites, in all fairness, like Belmead and Whitney Plantation are doing a good job of telling more of the full Black story there. There's a way that we need to experience that. There's a feeling, there's a vibe, there's something that happens when you go to a backyard barbecue, with your family, and that feels very different than going into a conference.
Right.
And so like, if we can just hold those two things as being true, then we can also say like, for a group of people who are not connected to this part of their history, who are also learning it for the first time, potentially alongside another group that's learning it for the first time, there may be some necessity to have a unique experience for people who are descendants of or deeply impacted by it and need to learn it in a different way. So your legacy tours is that it's an experience that is after hours where the grounds are just for descendants of survivors of enslavement, Black people. It is really meant for just a container for Black folks, and it ignites all the senses. It's the feelings, it's the smell, it's the energy, it's the music, and then you add all of that on to learning about your history. We're hoping that that experience, your legacy tours, is what will catalyze and help people want to come back and reconnect. And so just, adding that on as a layer to what Greenwood Seneca is doing. It's both the philosophy, but the actual experience that we're curating and inviting people into.
All right, sign me up. Sound like a summer something. Yes.
It just sounds like a healing experience, a healing experience.
Yeah. That's the hope.
Yeah. We'll definitely make sure we have all of your contact information in the short notes. Yes. That's beautiful.
Well, Boss Ladies, we know you want to hear more about bossing up with Tammy Gordon, but that's our show for today. Because we love you and we desire that you develop a deeper relationship with Black history, here's a recap of some of the many, many gems that Tammy shared with us today. Part of leaning into the importance of Black history is understanding your audience and being understood as an audience member. We have to choose viewpoints that offer us a well-rounded view of who we are and where we're going. Coming home to yourself is learning to bridge the gap between the work you do, your history, while learning to connect with your ancestors. In order to survive slavery, there had to have been a choice of joy, love, marriage, childbirth, families, dreams, and possibilities amidst the backdrop of pain. We had to choose life. If we can connect to this, what else can we reclaim? What else is possible through the revisiting of historic places where slavery happened? It's not for me or you to solve all of the problems. Do your best to ensure that you are doing enough to make the load a little bit lighter for those who will come behind you. Are you doing what's aligned to your core? Are you doing what you love? And finally, it's important to make sure that your children are aware of who they are so that they can have a healthy frame of reference for interacting with the world.
Woo.
Okay, Coach Khaya.
Yeah, she does that. It does it so well and still be interactive.
It's magic.
Thank you, Tammy. Gem after gem. I could have gone on, but we had to let the people listen for themselves.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. And we hope you enjoyed connecting with us today and learning more about the work of Tammy Gordon is doing with the Greenwood Seneca Foundation. Please connect with Tammy on Instagram at the Greenwood Seneca. Thank you so much and have a great day, Boss Ladies.
Thank you, Tammy.